Hi y'all, welcome to my channel. If you are new here, I'm Jamie Drew and I post weekly true crime videos about spooky stories and creepy cases. And so if that is something that interests you, please hit the subscribe button and don't forget to turn on that notification bell. That way you are notified every time I post a video. Today we will be talking about the solved case of murderer Betty Broderick. I do not want to give anything away that is in this case, but I will say that I kind of compare it to like a vehicle pileup, meaning that one bad thing happens and then it's another and another and another and another. And yeah, it's wild. So before I get started, I want to give my disclaimer that I have no intention of disrespecting any individual or topic within this video. All details were gathered on the internet and are intended for educational purposes only. So let's get started. Betty Broderick was born Elizabeth Ann, and I'm going to put her last name right here because I'm not even going to try to pronounce it because I know I'm going to mess it up. She was born in Bronxville, New York. She grew up in a strict religious household with her 5 other siblings, and her parents were very strict on all the children, and they taught Betty that her role in life was to become a good wife and mother. And fortunately for Betty, she would not have to wait long for her Prince Charming. In 1965, at the age of 17, on a weekend getaway to visit a girlfriend, Betty met 21-year-old Dan Broderick, the oldest son in a large Catholic family. They met in an after party after a football game between the University of Southern California and the University of Notre Dame. Dan was an undergrad student at the time at the University of Notre Dame, studying to become a doctor one day. Once the weekend was over, Dan pursued Betty via mail after she went home to New York, and the two reconnected when he moved to Manhattan to study medicine at Cornell University. And I have to clarify that Cornell has a campus there. I do not think it's their main campus, so don't get me on that one. Just 2 months after Betty received her accelerated degree in December of 1968, Dan proposed and the couple officially wed on April 12, 1969 at the Immaculate Conception Church in a lavish wedding ceremony. The young couple returned from their honeymoon pregnant with their first child, Kim. So it was a very successful honeymoon. Unfortunately, right away, troubles started to arise in their marriage. The couple argued quite a bit, and there were many divorce threats made, mostly coming from Betty. In her memoir, she claims that she tried to take her own life once and even considered it multiple times in those early years. But rewind back to when the couple got home from their honeymoon, Betty began working as the main supporter of the family to keep the bills paid while Dan finished his full-time studies. After their daughter Kim's birth in 1970, and upon completing his medical degree, Dan announced that he didn't want to proceed with his medical training and that he intended to combine it with a law degree. He enrolled at Harvard Law School while Betty held down a variety of jobs to support his studies. And I believe she held up to 5 jobs at once. I do know that she would go door to door selling Tupperware and Avon, and she would often bring her baby daughter along with her. And although that sounds miserable having 5 jobs, Betty claims that she loved every minute of it because supporting her family and her husband, that was what she was raised to do, and that's what she wanted to do. 1 year later, in 1971, Betty gave birth to another daughter, Kathy Lee, just a year after having Kim. In 1973, after Dan graduated from Harvard Law School, the family moved to the La Jolla area of San Diego, where Dan eventually became a medical malpractice attorney. All of their hard work had finally paid off, and Betty was able to start working part-time so she could enjoy being a stay-at-home mom and wife. Money did not come pouring in quickly, as Dan's initial salary at the law firm was quite meager. I was not able to find that exact amount. In time, Betty urged Dan to go into practice for himself, which he did. Shortly afterwards, Dan's career took off virtually overnight after he won his first $1 million case. And the Brodericks became millionaires, and it appeared that after years of hard work and sacrifice, they'd finally made it. And keep in mind that the $1 million back in the 70s would be equal to around $7 million today if you look at inflation. Betty and her husband were living the dream, and they grew their little family with 2 more babies, a son, Daniel, born in 1976, and Rhett, born in 1979. Betty does claim that during her marriage she actually got pregnant a total of 9 times, saying that Dan did not approve of her being on birth control. She did suffer a few miscarriages, a stillbirth, and possibly 1 or 2 terminations. I was not able to find exact numbers on those. The Brodericks were a well-known couple in the San Diego social circles, and they enjoyed a life of increasing affluence. Betty was finally able to quit working and reap the benefits of all of her hard work. They had a vacation place in Colorado, they had a boat, they had sports cars, they took first-class trips, and they were constantly entertaining. When Betty was not planning the next trip or dinner party with all her friends, she was taking care of her home and her children. With a big reputation comes big responsibilities, and Dan found himself spending more and more time at work than at home. Betty continually complained that Dan was an absent father and husband, and that he was spending too much time working and socializing with fellow attorneys. Betty protested that she felt like a single parent of their 4 kids. And in an interview with Dan, he would acknowledge these shortcomings, that he knew he could have done better as a father. But as we now know, it takes 2 to tango, and the couple's happy facade that Betty had painted was far from what was really inside. It was at one of Dan's work parties in 1983 where he would first encounter the beautiful woman whose professional relationship would soon rattle his 14-year marriage to Betty. Betty never really worried that Dan would catch eyes for another woman. I mean, after all, they had been through the trenches together, and they had a beautiful family. But when Betty overheard Dan telling a colleague that the new hire Linda was beautiful, her beliefs were shaken. In 1983, 21-year-old Linda Kolkena, a former air hostess, began working as a receptionist at the firm Dan's office was in. Dan was totally infatuated with her and eventually hired her as his personal assistant, giving her a nice office and a nice salary. As Linda and Dan got closer at work, Dan and Betty drifted more apart at home. Betty started noticing small things like him needing to constantly stay in contact with Linda even while they were on family vacations. There was even one instance where he sent Linda flowers, and I'm sure that this is normal to an extent because she is his personal assistant after all, but Dan was taking it to the extreme. Betty officially cracked on November 22nd, 1983, on Dan's 39th birthday. Betty was wanting to rekindle the fire in their dying marriage, and so she got all gussied up, and she made her way down to his office for a surprise birthday lunch that would end with the 2 of them watching the sunset over the marina. However, this dream was quickly squashed when Betty found out Dan and Linda had left at 11 a.m. and had yet to return. I do not know exactly what time Betty got there, but I do know that she decided to wait in Dan's office. But when she opened the door to his office, she was welcomed by leftovers of a party that she wasn't invited to. There were streamers, expensive imported champagne, and even her fine wedding crystal. When she went over to Linda's desk, she saw a photo of Dan that had actually been taken before he and Betty ever got married. Betty waited for hours, and they never came back. When Betty went home, she's frustrated, she's angry, and she actually took all of Dan's nice, super expensive clothes and she threw them in the yard and burned them. Of course, she confronted Dan about the affair, which he entirely denied, and this would be something he would actually gaslight Betty about for almost 2 years, just basically making her feel like she was crazy for believing such a thing. In February of 1985, so roughly 2 years later, Dan moved out and filed for divorce, and he also finally admitted to his affair with Linda. Broderick versus Broderick would be known as one of San Diego's worst divorce cases ever. Betty had a hard time getting an attorney because of Dan's professional status, so she often ended up representing herself, and if she did find a good attorney, representation did not last long. I did read somewhere that for Betty regarding the divorce, Dan loving her, it didn't really matter, but that she felt like Dan owed it to her to stay married. Betty's side in this divorce case was that her husband would not be where he was without her as a supportive partner and mother. And on the other side, Dan argued that he was solely self-made, since he was the one who completed all the schooling required to get him where he was. During this time, Dan actually had the court documents sealed so that nobody could access them, but I was able to find out a few things. So here are some things that we do know. In early 1986, so right after Dan left, the separated couple decided to sell their La Jolla home. Betty balked at the sale last minute, and Dan's lawyer had to obtain an emergency court order to sell the house. And Betty used this to her advantage, claiming that this was evidence of her husband's masterful ability to manipulate the court system. Betty called it putting a housewife in the ring with Muhammad Ali. After the court-ordered house sale was completed, Betty actually rammed her car through the front door of her former Hillcrest home while her ex-husband and her children were inside. And due to this, Dan actually used his medical background to have her sectioned as a psychiatric patient. And of course, this just pissed Betty off even more. So shortly after the wreck incident, Betty actually broke into her ex-husband's home and took a cream pie that Linda had made for him, and apparently was one of his favorites, and smashed it all in his clothes drawers, and then she went and spray painted like half the house. She would also drop the kids off one by one on Dan's doorstep, often unannounced, just because she wanted him to feel what it was like to raise a family alone, because that's how she felt all those years. Betty would also make numerous harassing phone calls and leave nasty voicemails, which led to her being sentenced to a month in a women's prison. And although we can sit here and talk about a lot of things Betty did, Dan was not without fault here either. Dan used his legal background to keep himself always one step ahead of the game. He would keep the kids from her, and he did manage to get full custody. I did read where at one point the two boys actually begged to go live with their mom because they knew that her being alone was driving her crazy and that it would cause her to do something irrational, which we now know is a little bit of foreshadowing. Dan did keep most of her belongings after the divorce, and he would keep them in a storage unit, and she would basically have to beg to get those items back. I did read that Dan was actually reprimanded by a judge because he was all the time taking Betty to court, but he was never actually pressing any charges. One thing we do know that both of them were guilty of was bad-mouthing the other in front of their children, and which is so detrimental during those young stages. And no one likes to hear that their other parent sucks, you know? The parents basically unintentionally forced the kids to kind of have to pick sides. Not to mention the children would often hear the voicemails that were left by the other. This was back, keep in mind, this was back when people used their house phones and they had answering machines that would play out loud while it was being recorded. These messages often had super foul language and were wishing the worst on the other. Betty would often threaten to kill Dan, but apparently she had always threatened to kill people if things were not going her way. For example, one of her daughters said, she'd say, "Take the trash out or I'll kill you." So no one really thought much of it. One voicemail situation that was actually brought up in court was when her 11-year-old son Daniel was walking by the answering machine and overheard his mom mid-rant. He answered, pleading with his mother to please stop using bad words, and he accused her of only caring about money. Young Daniel told her, "All you care about is your stupid money. You want everything. You want all the kids, all the money to get rid of Linda, and it's not going to work, Mom. You've been mad long enough." Whereas Betty made a lot of threats, her ex-husband Dan also would make threats to her, but financially. He would withhold money from her monthly allowance. So he would withhold $100 for every obscene word she used, $250 for each time she set foot on his property, $500 for every entry into his home, and $1,000 for every time she took one of the children without his permission. Now let's talk about money. Originally, Betty had been granted $9,000 a month in alimony and child support payments. I think he also bought her an oceanfront home, but then I saw somewhere else that it was just a raggedy condo. But either way, he purchased shelter, and that is a key element in human survival. I do know too that $9,000 sounds like a lot, because it is a lot, but keep in mind that Dan was bringing in around $150,000 plus a month. So she was frustrated. She was getting such a small piece of this pie, and it was a pie that she felt like she had made. Although Betty received $118,000 a year in alimony and child support payments from her ex-husband, she complained that she could not afford attorney services when she could find an attorney. There was actually one lawyer that she gave a gold and diamond necklace to in place of his retainer fee. She did fight this, and she actually managed to get an additional $5,000 a month for 5 years. I know a lot of us here, we probably wouldn't complain, but in Betty's mind, she had dedicated every aspect of her life to Dan for almost 20 years, and she believed that she made him who he was today. And she believed that he owed her more than that. But in the end, Dan won and Betty lost. Dan kept the majority of the money, he got the kids, and he ultimately controlled Betty's future financially. 5 years later, once the divorce was finalized, Dan proposed to Linda, and the two were married on April 22nd, 1969. At their wedding, the couple hired security guards, and Dan was actually encouraged to wear a bulletproof vest, since Betty was notorious for breaking into their home and or showing up at the wrong place at the wrong time. After the wedding, Linda tried to file a restraining order against Betty, but Dan would not allow it. Although Dan and Betty's divorce was settled, the war was not over. That was until Betty put an end to it all with her .38 caliber revolver. One weekend, when Betty had her 2 boys, she woke up and she got dressed and she grabbed her purse and she made her way over to her ex-husband's house. Once there, Betty entered the back door using a key she stole from her daughter's key ring and made her way up to the couple's bedroom, and she opened the door to reveal the newlyweds peacefully asleep. Betty unloaded 5 rounds and fatally shot 28-year-old Linda twice, once in the chest and once in the neck, and she shot 44-year-old Dan once in the back as he tried to get out of bed. He apparently sat up and said, "Okay, you shot me, I'm dead." Dan then fell to the floor and reached for his house phone on his nightstand to call for help. Betty walked over to the nightstand and ripped the phone jack out the wall, preventing Dan from calling 911. Linda died instantly, and Dan died shortly after. The couple had only been married for 7 months. Betty fled the scene and went to a payphone where she called her good friend Diane Black and told her what happened. Diane called Betty's boyfriend, who then rushed over to the newlyweds' mansion where he discovered their bloody bodies. And the reason I said boyfriend is because this guy was somebody that he was with Betty all the time, but she never actually claimed that he was her boyfriend, but everyone said he was her boyfriend, so that was what that was. Betty then went over to her daughter Kathy Lee's home, where she consulted with her family and friends before going with an attorney to the local police station, where she turned herself in. And while Betty fought for bail, Dan and Linda were laid to rest together in Greenwood Memorial Park in San Diego. Dan's estate was divided up between 3 of his 4 children. Kathy Lee had been written out of her father's will due to her rebellious behavior. And I know there was some type of lawsuit that Linda's family had because they felt like they deserved a part of Dan's life insurance policy since him and Linda were married. And I do know that Dan's brother actually received the full amount. Betty was denied bond and went to court in October of 1990. The main question was not whether or not she had killed them, it was whether or not this murder was premeditated. Premeditated means to decide to kill before actually taking action. Most people think this has to be a lengthy decision-making process. However, a person can deliberate in a very short amount of time. The prosecutor, Carrie Wells, said, "Well, yeah, this is premeditated." And the defense, Jack Early, said no. The defense claimed that Betty was driven over the edge by years of psychological, emotional, and mental abuse at the hands of her husband, Dan Broderick, and that the events that happened that night led to manslaughter. That Betty was a woman who sacrificed her entire being to be nothing more than a perfect mother and a perfect wife to all of her children and her husband. Through witness testimony, including testimony by Betty herself, the defense showed how Betty held down 5 jobs in the early years of their marriage to help her young husband get through medical school and then law school. Without Betty, Dan never could have become the successful attorney he was. By all witness accounts, Betty was truly the perfect mother, and she was hardworking, and she was a loyal wife. But her husband Dan traded her in for a younger model by cheating on her behind her back for years with Linda, then ultimately divorcing Betty, getting custody of all of their children, and then marrying Linda. After years of Dan's lies and his bullying, Betty snapped and committed the murders. The prosecution asked, if this wasn't premeditated, then why would Betty bring a revolver into the bedroom of her ex-husband at like 5 in the morning? Betty's response was, because I wanted him to listen to me. She claimed that her intention was to make him listen to her, and that if he wouldn't, she actually planned to take her own life. When pressed for an answer as to why she did not take her own life after murdering Dan and Linda, she just stated that she ran out of bullets. She claimed that she had shot her ex-husband in the heat of passion because as soon as she entered the bedroom, she was startled when Linda started screaming, "Call the police." The prosecution said that Betty was a cold-hearted, selfish, narcissistic murderer who planned and schemed to kill her ex-husband for a very long time. They played all the nasty phone messages that Betty left on their answering machine, and they showed evidence of where Betty had repeatedly vandalized their home. And after 4 long days of deliberation, the jury returned split. 2 of the jury members refused to believe that she was guilty of premeditated murder, and they weren't budging. One of the jurors was actually quoted as saying, "I only wonder what took her so long." Although, Betty was excited, she felt that this was a win for her. Her excitement would not last long. At her second trial in December of 1991, the jury found her guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 32 years to life in prison. And although Betty apparently was a model prisoner and she didn't have any write-ups and she was behaving, she has been denied parole twice. Once in 2010 and again in 2017 for not showing any remorse or change in her character. The Board of Prison Terms Commissioner said, "Your heart is still bitter and you are still angry. You show no significant progress in evolving. You are still back 20 years ago in the same mode." Betty is still in prison today and will not be eligible for parole again until January of 2032. Her children, who now have their own children, do maintain a relationship with their mother. However, the children are evenly split when it comes to whether or not they believe she should be gifted her freedom. Her son, Rhett, said, "She's a nice lady. Everyone here would like her if they spoke to her on any other topic other than my dad. Keeping her in prison isn't really helping her. She's not a danger to society. The only 2 people she was a danger to are dead." There have been many movies and TV shows and books written about this case. Betty herself does have a memoir that you can get on Amazon, as does her daughter Kim. And so that's the case, everyone. It's sad because everyone was at fault in it, and there's a lot that can be said, but I will say that whether you are the person being abused or the individual doing the abusing, I hope that we can recognize those mental health signs and get people the help they need sooner than later to help prevent things like this. I'm not sure where this case would, how this case would have ended had it happened in today's society, just because we are doing a better job at recognizing those, but it's sad, and I hope it's something that we can learn from to hopefully prevent in the future. And so, yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on this. Betty has a huge following. Definitely do not condone murder here, but I would love to know your thoughts on it, and if this is a video that you liked, please give me a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.